Hi guys, so after the fake alert to Hawaii and the fake alert to Japan, Japan now hosts its first ballistic missile evacuation drill, and it's escalating its efforts to prepare its citizens for war, with Tokyo hosting its first ballistic missile evacuation drill. While tensions between North Korea and South Korea have eased over the Winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang, Japanese government officials were not taking any chances. The choreographed evacuations at a community center, amusement park, and subway involved 300 volunteers simulating a missile launch from Country X. Don't know why they called it Country X. An advisory about a missile launch was just issued. Everyone, please stay calm and seek shelter in the basement. Messages blared over the loudspeakers at the amusement park. This comes as the Russian spy ship that was spotted in the Caribbean heading towards the East Coast is now just 100 miles off of North Carolina. And the Russian spy ship's name is Viktor Leonov, and it's 100 miles southeast of Wilmington, North Carolina, in international waters. This comes just days after the vessel was seen leaving the capital of Trinidad and Tobago, Port of Spain. The US military official said the Russian ship is being tracked by the USS Cole and other naval assets, outfitted with a variety of high-tech spy equipment and designed to intercept communication signals. The Viktor Leonov was observed operating in the Caribbean last week, a US defense official told CNN. It was unclear at the time where the vessel was heading, but the official said the spy ship has typically travelled up the eastern seaboard near Cape Canaveral, Kings Bay, Norfolk, and New London in the past. All these locations are home to US naval installations. A second official told CNN last week that based on historical patterns, the ship is likely on a 4 to 6 month deployment off the East Coast, where it will be conducting intelligence operations. The Russian ship routinely performs this mission. What's strange to me about this report is the fact that it seems that they're trying to normalize this behavior. As in, oh, there's a Russian spy ship off the East Coast, don't worry about it, it's there. It's always there, going up and down the East Coast. I mean, this is a foreign adversary. You'd think they'd be more concerned about it. They're just monitoring it with the USS Cole and other military installations, but there doesn't seem to be any urgency here. Doesn't seem to be any concern. But at the same time, whether it was planned before or not, it's convenient timing that they launched the Atlas V, which I mentioned. They were supposed to launch it on January the 18th, but they postponed it due to the rocket booster's liquid oxygen system having issues. So they say. I have no idea if that's true. But then they launched it the very next day on January the 19th, just as this Russian spy ship was getting closer to the east coast of the United States and now sits approximately 100 miles off of the United States. And obviously that's in line with the news I already reported about the drone that they have. Then we get to China, and China's making a big push not only in the economic market with its Petro Yuan, it's also pushing more into the Western Pacific, particularly around Taiwan. So, with the Trump administration warning of a possible war with North Korea, US allies in Asia are sounding the alarm on another risk, a clash with China in the Western Pacific. China has recently accelerated air and naval excursions in sensitive areas near Japan and Taiwan, part of a long-standing quest to expand its military presence further from its shores into the Pacific Ocean. Leaders in Tokyo and Taipei have called on Beijing to back off while strengthening their defenses. Earlier this month, Japan observed for the first time a Chinese submarine entering the contiguous zone 12 nautical miles to 24 nautical miles from shore around disputed islets in the East China Sea. That came shortly after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen warned that China's increased military patrols around the islands threatened to destabilize the region. And in response to that, the USS Hopper came within 12 nautical miles of Hwanggang Island on Wednesday, China's foreign ministry stated. The small island, also known as the Scarborough Shoal, is a disputed territory also claimed by the Philippines. The US has slammed China for constructing islands and military installations in the region, arguing that they could be used to obstruct free trade routes. American officials speaking to Reuters on condition of anonymity, anonymity, sorry about that, have said Wednesday's innocent passage patrol was in accordance with international law. Whether it's innocent or not, there's a clear push by China in all directions to expand their power, their military power, their economic power. They're really, really going for it. And at the moment, though I believe that US military is probably on the ball in terms of looking at these threats, in terms of the American public, they're not being shown by the mainstream media these things. They might pop up on the news for about 2 minutes, and then it's back to the Russia investigation or the government shutdown or some stripper named Stormy. I mean, it's a little bit unusual that such threats are either taken casually, like the Russian spy ship, or they're not mentioned at all, like this China expansion in all areas, threatening the economics of America and the safety of America, as well as other countries in the world, such as the EU nations. And that just stands out because China and India are on the brink of World War III, and their armies apparently are just 10 meters apart. This comes after India fired off one of its Agni 5 missiles. And that's another thing. I don't know why all these missiles have their names and then they've got 5 attached to them. You know, like this Atlas 5 and this Agni 5. And then you've got Japan with its missile evacuation drills, Country X. All these things they're really weird. They're not kind of normal. I mean, X marks the spot. We all know that coming from, Pirate Land. But are they being that obvious? Who knows? But tensions between the military titans, India and China, reached breaking point this week after Chinese armoured vehicles raced to the contested Doklam Plateau. Satellite images show China's People's Liberation Army occupied land up to 10 meters away from a key Indian army outpost. A report published shortly after the photos came to light said these are the first images that show the extent of the Chinese deployment at Doklam and indicate a likely permanent PLA deployment. The move will come as a huge blow to India's army chief Bipin Rawat, who last year proudly said Beijing pulled huge numbers out of the area. Sorry, I'm not I'm not all together today. Please bear with me when I make these kind of mistakes. He added, this is disputed territory between the Kingdom of Bhutan and China. There has been a reduction in the strength of Chinese troops there, but there is the possibility that they would come back in force after the winter. We have to wait and see. So, as I mentioned before in the previous video, India and China, they're not too much talked about. We're really a lot more concerned with Iran and North Korea and the potential for war kicking off in those areas. But now you've got a third front. It just seems like all the pieces are moving, and they're moving so quickly. It's hard to keep up. But, thank God that we are able to access this information without having to rely on the government or the mainstream media to provide it. Otherwise, we'd be in the dark. And this all stands out even more so because the British Army, again, we're back to Britain, senior British military officials or officers have been deployed to South Korea to draw up plans for evacuating around 8,000 British citizens if war breaks out. The officers, who visited for a fortnight in October and returned this month for 10 days, investigated how UK citizens could be helped to flee before or during an attack by the North Korean regime. British military sources are growing increasingly concerned that US President Donald Trump could launch preemptive strikes to destroy Kim Jong-un's nuclear ballistic missile program. Analysts believe such an assault would provoke a fierce counterattack against South Korea. Only makes sense since we've got 5 US carriers over there, B-1B, B-12, BH-52 bombers over there as well. China and Russia military on the border with North Korea, Japan practicing evacuation drills, missile detection satellites being launched, Russian spy ships near the east coast, India and China 10 meters apart in terms of armies and just being ready for conflict, Iran with Syria and Israel and Jerusalem and Palestine. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a complete mess. How we're gonna get out of this, I don't know. But it's clear that the focus can't just be on North Korea because there's other pieces moving, and war is just as likely to kick off in those areas as it is on the Korean Peninsula. even now it seems like the tension is shifting, or partially have shifted, from the Korean Peninsula over to Iran, because now they're accusing Iran of supplying missiles to the Houthis who are firing at Israel. And Donald Trump still wants to decertify the Iran nuclear deal, which will basically just leave Iran free to pursue their weapons. They're not going to enter into another deal. They're not going to accept changes to the current deal. So what happens then? They just carry on doing what they were doing before, and there's no deal in place that would even slow them down. Whether it has or not up to now, I really can't be certain. But at least it hasn't reached the crisis point of North Korea where they're actually firing off ballistic missiles and doing nuclear tests underground. Ah, jeez. All of that with the British preparing to evacuate any British citizens in the event of a war breaking out in the Korean Peninsula is only in line with Rex Tillerson saying now that the US won't demand North Korea give up weapons as a precondition to talks. That stands out to me because it's not just a sign of diplomacy, it's a sign that it's the last steps of diplomacy. This is basically Rex Tillerson begging North Korea to come to the table, because if they don't, what comes next is going to be war. So Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said the US is ready to talk with North Korea without preconditions. We said from the diplomatic side, we're ready to talk anytime North Korea would like to talk. Tillerson said at the Atlantic Council in Washington on Tuesday. We are ready to have the first meeting without precondition, Tillerson said. Let's just meet, and we can talk about the weather if you want. Talk about whether it's going to be a square table or a round table, if that's what you're excited about. But can we at least sit down and see each other face to face, and then we can begin to lay out a map, a road map of what we might be willing to work towards? Does that not sound like someone who's desperate to see peace and diplomacy work because he knows what could potentially come next, or even knows what's coming next? Because according to the next report, the Pentagon is preparing for the invasion of North Korea. In February, coming next month, army installations across the United States will organize mobilization centers for rapid overseas deployment. The move will resemble the activity of similar task forces in Syria and Iraq. On this edition of the Geopolitical Report, we examine Trump's rhetoric on North Korea that underscores the move for war we are now witnessing with military exercises and preparation for mobilization. The president and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, have exchanged increasingly bellicose barbs that move the two nations closer to war. A conflict, Trump's Secretary of State James Mad Dog Mattis has admitted, would be catastrophic. Meanwhile, North and South Korea have engaged in talks about reunification and joint participation in the upcoming Olympics, a move that has drawn the ire of UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, demonstrating the policy schizophrenia of the Trump administration. The State Department disagreed with Haley and said the delegation wasn't driving a wedge between the US and South Korea. There are two reasons for North Korea's intransigence in regard to its nuclear program. I'm going to have to look that one up. First and foremost, the near total destruction of the country by the United States during the Korean War, and secondarily, the fact possessing nukes will make the United States think twice about invading the country and disposing of the Kim Jong-un regime. There we have, basically, in February, they're getting their mobilization centers ready for rapid overseas deployment. And all the other things I mentioned, I'm not even going to list them again because it took a lot of breath out of me. There's a lot going on, guys. Things are reaching the tipping point. I know I've said that a few times before, but each time I hear a new report, it just edges closer and closer and closer to that point of no return. And with all the other things going on, and that have rapidly escalated in this month, I just don't know where we're going to be, at the end of this month or come February, whether we'll even make it to March and April and May and June in terms of making it there without any conflicts kicking off, because it doesn't seem like we will. According to these reports, it looks like we're literally a month or two away. And that's just the whole reason why I do these reports, to try and get the news to you as quickly as possible, to show you exactly what is going on in this world that we're living in. And the last report has nothing to do with the others, but it does have something to do with the La Palma volcano, the La Cumbre Vieja volcano that I've mentioned before. And these reports don't come out very often about anything going on with the volcano. But it just says here, Canary Island volcano warning, landslide to spark mega eruption as powerful as atomic bomb. And that's been the theory with this volcano for a number of months, years now. So this is nothing new. But the reason I wanted to show it to you is because they've got a little video here where you can see kind of a diagram or like a little description of what would happen. The video is 4 minutes 1 second, so just have a watch. So just in case you're not sure what you're looking at there, that's basically the volcano there. Some of its flank has split away from the volcano. This would be during an eruption, and the outgoing circle is the wave, the tsunami that's been generated by it. I'm just going to stop it there because you can clearly see from the video that there is basically no coastline on this side of the Atlantic that wouldn't be affected, and those heights that were given are all dependent upon the size of land that slides into the ocean and the high tide, winds, all those kind of things come into have to be considered when you're talking about a potential wave height approaching the coasts of any country. So I would just suggest that as a rough estimation. It could be lower if the tide's low, it could be higher if the tide's high, it could be higher if the wind is stronger, all sorts of things. And that's just what I wanted to point out, give you a kind of a realistic breakdown of the potential that that volcano has to cause a tsunami. And that's the end of my video, guys. I hope all the information in there is easy to follow. And as always, have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. God bless.